Hi all, welcome to another session of environmental studies classes. So in this session, we'll be looking into two aspects. One will be ecosystem, its introduction, function and structure. And the other one will be energy flow in an ecosystem, food chain, food web and ecological succession. So the main objectives of this session will be to know about our ecosystem, to understand about the functions of ecosystem, to understand about the energy flow in an ecosystem, to know about the ecological succession. So after this session, you'll get to know what is an ecosystem, what is the function of an ecosystem, how does the energy flow in an ecosystem, and about the ecological succession also. So ecosystem. Now let's look into ecosystem. So what do you think is an ecosystem? Ecosystem is a self-regulating group of biotic communities of species interacting with one another with their non-living environment exchanging energy and matter. So it is the interaction between the biotic components and the interact with the abiotic components. I hope you remember what is biotic and abiotic components, because in the last class we had gone through what is biotic and abiotic components. So this interaction between the biotic components along with the abiotic components is termed as an ecosystem. So you might think, what is the difference between an ecosystem and an environment? So environment is the surrounding wherein which we live. In that surrounding, the interaction between the biotic and the abiotic components to live in that surrounding is known as ecosystem. So ecosystem varies for different species. Okay, that is to be kept in mind. So the study of an ecosystem is called as ecology. Now, when we talk more about ecosystem is a unit or a system which is composed of number of subunits. They may exchange energy and matter from outside. When there is exchange of matter and energy from the outside, it is termed as open ecosystem. And when there is exchange of energy and matter in a closed surface or isolated from the outside system, it is termed as a closed ecosystem. The closed ones are generally artificial, and one example is biosphere reserves. Life on Earth is sustained by the flow of energy from sun cycling of nutrients. Now, when talking about the concepts of ecosystem, there are many supporting systems like forests, oceans, grasslands, deserts, which have structural components and functions. They all have living organisms interacting with their surrounding, exchanging matter and energy. The word ecology, I hope you remember what is ecology, isn't it? The study of ecosystem. So the word ecology was coined by Ernest Haeckel in 1869 from a Greek word called okios, means home, plus logos, means study. So ecology is a study of organisms in their natural home interacting with the biotic and abiotic components. Now let's look into the characteristics of an ecosystem. So the things that we need to look into is the structure of an ecosystem, function of an ecosystem, ecological succession, and types of ecosystem. These belongs to the characteristics of an ecosystem. So we will be looking in depth into each characteristics. So when talking about the structure of an ecosystem. So ecosystem composes of abiotic and biotic components. So if you remember, the ecosystem definition states that it is an interaction between the biotic and the abiotic components. So it consists of abiotic and biotic components. When talking about the abiotic components, it consists of climatic factors and edaphic factors. Climatic factors include rain, light, wind, temperature, and the edaphic factor, which is related to soil. So examples of it includes the soil, minerals, oxygen, and topography. And coming to the biotic components, I hope you remember biotic components are those components that are living components, isn't it? Whereas abiotic is non-living components. So when we talk about the biotic components, it includes the producers, the consumers, and the decomposers. The plants, the living organisms, the microorganisms, everything comes under biotic components. So if we talk about producers, they're also known as autotrophs because they produce their own energy. And when we talk about the consumers, they are also known as heterotrophs. They consume the energy. They consume the energy transfer from another. Okay, and also transfer energy. When talking about the decomposers, they're better known as reducers or saprotrophs and helps in recycling of energy. So, uh, so these are the components, biotic components, which we'll be looking into in depth later. Biotic components. So first we'll talk about producers. So producers are the ones, they produce their own food either by the process of photosynthesis or by a chemical process. So plants produce food by photosynthesis using sun, carbon dioxide and water in the presence of chlorophyll. I hope everyone knows it, isn't it? Thus they are known as autotrophs because they produce the food on their own. Okay, there are some microorganisms which produce organic matter to some extent by oxidation of certain chemicals in the absence of light. Such or microorganisms are called as chemotrophs. That is why in the definition of the producers, it is said they produce their own food either by the process of photosynthesis, which includes the autotroph, or by chemical process, which includes the chemotrophs. Next, if we talk about consumers, consumers are all organisms which get their food by feeding on the other organisms. So they get their food and they get their energy by feeding on the other organisms. These include herbivorous, carnivorous, omnivorous. I hope you remember what these things are because we have studied in the lower classes. So when talking about herbivorous, it is nothing but feeds on producers, also called as plant eaters and also called as primary consumers. So carnivorous feeds on other consumers. If they feed on herbivores, they are called as secondary consumers. If the carnivores feed on other carnivores, they are called as tertiary carnivores or tertiary consumers, which include snake, big fishes, etc. So when talking about omnivores, they feed on both plants and animals. So as humans, what category do you think we belong to? Of course, it will be omnivorous because we can consume both plants as well as animals. And when talking about the detrivorous, they feed on the parts of dead organism, waste of a living organism. They are also called as saprotrophs or detrious feeders. Now, when talking about, so we learned about producers, we looked into consumers. Now, the next category is decomposers. So, decomposers are nothing but they get their energy by breaking down complex organic matter to the simpler ones. Example is bacteria and fungi. So, in the below figure, you can see the producers, what all comes under the category of producer, what all comes under the category of consumers, and what all comes under the category of decomposers. So in this images, I hope from this images you are able to point out which are the carnivores, or I mean which are the consumers, which are the producers, which are omnivorous, herbivorous, carnivorous, all those things. I hope you are able to identify from this picture. Now, when we talk about abiotic factors, in one term, we can say that abiotic factors are the non-living components. So they include physical, chemical, and geographical factors. The physical factors include the sunlight and the shade, the intensity of solar flux, average temperature, annual rainfall, wind, soil type, availability of water. All this comes under the physical factors. So we can clearly see difference in these physical factors in a desert, in a tropical land, in a tundra ecosystem. So that means in different ecosystem, there is variation in this abiotic components. And also according to the geographical location variation also we can see variation in abiotic components. So it is not the same. According to the ecosystem, it differs. When talking about the chemical factors, they include the availability of nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, hydrogen, potassium, oxygen, sulfur, salts causing salinity, which influences the function of an ecosystem, and also the geographic factors, which include latitude, longitude, as well as altitude. Now, this is a nutrient cycle and an energy flow showing diagram, wherein which the blue lines indicate the chemical cycling and the red lights indicate the energy flow. So the arrows shows how the nutrient cycle and the energy flow takes place from the sun to the primary producers to the primary consumers, wherein which it can go to the detritus and also to the secondary or tertiary consumers, wherein which it can go to the detritus again. So there is a continuous cycle that is happening, so that is why it is called as nutrient cycling, and how the energy flow happens from one state or level to the other level. Now, when talking about the functions of ecosystem, in ecosystem, energy and matter exchange occurs in a definite pattern. Nutrient and energy move along the food chain. Producers, consumers are arranged in specific manner, and their interaction along the population size is called trophic structures, and the levels as trophic level. So the interaction along with the population size in a specific manner can be termed as trophic structures. And when each level, these interactions and the specific and the interaction as well as the specific manner in which they are arranged, that each levels is known as trophic level. And the amount of living matter at each level is called standing crop or standing biomass. Now let's look into the types of ecosystem. So coming to the types of ecosystem, there is terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. In the terrestrial ecosystem, it includes forests, grasslands, semi-arid areas, deserts, mountains, islands. So if you look, if you remember what was taught in the previous slides and all, you can see. So the physical factors, the geographical factors, the chemical factors differs from each ecosystem to ecosystem. So from these examples, you can imagine how it will differ from ecosystem to ecosystem. And coming to the aquatic ecosystem, it includes ports, lakes, wetlands, deltas, marine, etc. Now let's look into what is food chain. So the sequence of eating and being eaten is called as food chain. Okay, someone is the food of other. Okay, the three major food chains are basing food chain, parasitic food chain, and detritus food chain. When we talk about basing food chain, it starts from the producers, that is the green plants. When we talk about the parasitic food chain, it goes from the large organism to the smaller ones without actually killing, as in the case of predators. So there is no actual killing, but there is a food chain happening from the larger organism to the smaller ones without natural or an outright killing. When talking about the detritus food chain, it starts from the dead organic matter. So this figure shows a simple example of a grazing food chains, which starts from plants. Okay, so from the grass, it passes, grass is eaten by the primary consumers, that is the deer, wherein which the deer is in turn eaten by lion, which are the secondary consumers, or we can say the carnivores. So this is a simple chain, and you can also see how the energy transfers from the energy with the grass got from the sun is transferred to the deer. From the deer, it gets transferred to the lion. So in this way, and from the lion, when we can say that the energy again, when it dies, when the lion dies, it gets transferred to the microorganism or the detritus material. So this is another grazing food chain example, and the figure itself, it is very evident how the food chain works, how the energy transfer is transferring. So if you look at the figure, it is very evident. And this is an example of marine food chain. So from the bottom, that is from the phytoplankton, which is the primary producers, is consumed by the zooplankton, which is the primary consumers. The zooplankton is in turn consumed by the small fish, which is secondary consumer. And the small fish is again intaken by the large fish, which is a tertiary consumer. And the large fish is again taken by a much bigger large fish, which we can say, which is a quantity consumer. So in this way, the food chain happens in marine. It's an example. There are many other examples too. So this is an example of detritus food chain, wherein which it starts from dead organic matter, isn't it? So from the dead leaves, it is eaten by woodlouse, which is an insect, which is in return eaten by blackbirds. So this is how the detritus food chain happens. Another example is also given below. Now, much more example which you can do as a homework. You can write an example of a grazing food chain, a marine food chain, and a detritus food chain. And mangrove ecosystem. Mangrove ecosystem here is another example, which also is an example of, if you remember in the previous slide, it is an example of the detritus food chain. So from the sun, it starts to the mangrove, then to the detritus, then to the solitary crab and small fish. So in this way, the mangrove ecosystem happens. So from the dead, you can say, in other terms, you can say from the dead matter, it starts. From the detritus parts, it starts. Food web. So till now we learned about food chain. Now when we talk about food web, what do you think will be food web? Well, food web, in a single word, we can say that it is an interconnected or interrelated food chain. Okay, no food chain is isolated. Organisms act as various levels in different food chain. Feed on more than one type of organism forms a more complex food web. Thus, food web is a network of food chain where different types of organisms are connected at different trophic level, so that there are a number of options of eating and being eaten at each trophic level. So this is an example of a food web. You can see how organisms are being, a single organism is eaten by a number of other organisms, and a lot many other organisms are eaten by a single organism. So which is seen in different trophic levels. So this is how the food chain. So there is a interlink between the food chain, and in the connected or interlinked network of food chain forms the food web. So it is very evident from these two figures. Now, when we talk about the significance of food chain and food web, suppose the significance, and there is an energy and nutrient flow, maintains population of different species, and thus maintain an ecological balance. So one of the significant, it maintains ecological balance. Next is biomagnification. It is rather a harmful phenomena wherein which at each tropical level there is a buildup of harmful substances. So one such example is the buildup of DDT in higher animals. So this is a case study. You can just refer the case study so that you get an idea of what actually is biomagnification and how it affects. Okay, how it drastically affect the ecosystem. Now let's talk about ecological pyramids. So ecological pyramids are the graphic representation of trophical structures and functions of ecosystem. It starts with the producers at the base and the consumers at the successive levels towards the apex, that is towards the top, and this is called as ecological pyramid. Okay, there are three types of ecological pyramid. The three types are, one is based on the pyramid of number, the other one pyramid of biomass, the other one pyramid of energy. When we talk about the pyramid of number, it represents the number of individual organism at each level. So what do you think, in which tropic level will be the individuals more? Of course, at the base level, that is the producer level, we can see the number of individuals more, isn't it? Yeah. So it can be upright or inverted. So one such example is shown in this figure. You can see the producers at the base, then comes the primary consumer, then comes the secondary consumer, then comes the tertiary consumer. So it shows the number of individual organisms at each tropic level with the height getting decreased. So if you take an example of a simple food chain, and connect it with this pyramid, you get a more understanding about it. So these are other examples. Okay, the upright example number of the first two figures shows an upright pyramid of numbers in grassland, and the other one in pond. So the producers has more number of individual, and when coming to the higher level, the number of individual is getting reduced. That is why it forms a pyramid. An upright pyramid can be seen in grasslands and ponds. So an inverted pyramid is seen, we can see it in parasitic food chain. Parasitic food chain, we can see an inverted pyramid. And also a narrow pyramid can be seen in a forest. That is, the number of individual at these level decreases. So when coming to the parasitic food chain, producers will be a single tree, which is from the tree, fruits or whatever seeds is there will be consumed by the herbivores. These herbivores will be consumed when they die. It is consumed by the parasites, and so on. So when you take each tropic level, the number of individual is getting increased in this parasitic food chain. That is why it is showing an inverted pyramid. And again, when talking about the narrow pyramid, you can see from the example itself, from the image itself, it is understood. Now, when we talk about the pyramid of biomass, it is based on the total biomass, that is dry matter at every level in a food chain. It can be either upright or inverted. So the two figures shows how the pyramid of biomass. One is the first figure is an upright pyramid of biomass, and second figure is an inverted pyramid of biomass. The upright pyramid of biomass is in a terrestrial ecosystem, and an inverted pyramid of biomass is in an aquatic ecosystem. So in the base, you can see the total biomass or the dry matter is more at the base level, and when coming to the terrestrial and talking about the terrestrial ecosystem, it will be more at the base. The dry matter will be more at the base level, that is the producer level. That with the increase in height or with the increase in the tropic level, the dry matter is getting reduced, and it is inverted in the case of pyramid of biomass of an aquatic system. So these are two examples. When talking about the pyramid of energy, it is the amount of energy at each tropic level. One important thing that you need to keep in mind is it is always upright. It cannot be inverted or narrow. It is always upright. That is, highest energy is found at the base level. With the increase in the tropic level, so the energy gets decreased, goes on decreasing or reducing. Energy goes on reducing at each level. Loss is in the form of heat or respiration. Shows sharp decline from the producers to the carnivores. That is, it will be in a pyramid. That is why it is appearing to be in a pyramid shape. So from each tropic level, and a 10% of energy is lost or reduced when you go to the successive higher energy levels. So now let's talk about energy flow. Energy flow is in an ecosystem is unidirectional, that it follows a single path. Source of energy is the sun. The main source of energy is the sun. Plants convert this energy into chemical energy. Energy is in the subsequent tropic level, the energy is lost through body functions like respiration. And this energy flow follows two laws of thermodynamics. The first law is energy can neither be created nor be destroyed. It can be converted from one form to another. So whatever energy is there from the beginning, it is getting converted to one form or the another. It is not getting created again and again in each topic level. No, neither it is getting destroyed also. It is converting from one form to the another, or the same or the reduced energy is getting transferred to each subsequent levels of tropic levels. And when talking about the second law, it is the energy dissipated as it is used, the energy. So from when you go to the higher tropic level, due to the locomotion or due to the respiration, all these things, the energy is lost. After the energy is lost, what is the leftover? That energy is transferred to the next higher tropic level. So in general, we can say that only 10% of energy, what is totally there, is transferred to the next tropic level. And there are energy flow models which explains the flow of energy. So this is a image that shows the energy flow and how it happens. So the energy starts from the sun, it goes to the producers. From the producers, a little bit of energy is lost through heat. What energy is stored in the producers, it get moved on or transferred to the consumers. From the consumers, again through the process of locomotion or excretion or respiration, some of the energy is lost, and whatever is being stored in the consumer level, this energy gets transferred to the detritus level. The decomposers level. So from the decomposers, again energy is lost. Whatever is stored in the decomposers get it transferred to the inorganic nutrient pool, and in this way the energy flow happens. Universal energy flow model. It was explained by the ecologist E.P. Odom. Says as the flow of energy takes place, there is a gradual decrease in energy. Thus, less energy is available at each tropic level. Loss occurs by the process of locomotion, excretion, respiration. Rest is stored as biomass and passed further. That is what we earlier looked into. Now, when we talk about the nutrient cycling, nutrients are important functional attribute. These nutrients are available to biotic components, that is the living components, through natural resources. Nutrients, if not returned back, would end up and not be available for future use. These nutrients are thus cycled through biogeochemical cycles. Nutrients are decomposed, converted by microorganism and ready to use again through the process of biogeochemical cycle. And this cycle continues. So there is oxygen cycle, water cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle. All these things, because of the repeated cycling that is happening, the nutrients are cycled through and is available for the future also. So this is an image which shows the nutrient cycle. Another image which shows the carbon cycling, how the carbon is cycled in an ecosystem and how it is being utilized and how it is being given for the future, how it can be used in the future. So that cycling is shown in this figure. Now, when talking about the primary production, primary productivity is the rate of energy captured by the producers, which is equal to the amount of new biomass of the producers per unit time and space. The net primary production is thus the amount of energy stored by the producers and potentially available to the consumers and decomposers. Gross primary production is equal to total number of energy captured, and the net primary production NPP is equal to gross primary production minus respiration. When talking about the secondary production or secondary productivity is the rate of production of new biomass by consumers. That is the rate at which the consumers convert organic material into a new biomass of consumers. The secondary production simply involves the repacking of the energy previously captured by the producers. So there is actually a repacking of the energy which the producer had already produced. No additional energy is being made or created or introduced into the food chain. When talking about the ecosystem regulation, all ecosystem regulate and maintain themselves under a set of environmental conditions. If there is a strain in this ecosystem or the environment, it tries to resist and maintain that balance. This mechanism is called as hemostasis. The tolerance and the resistance possibly only within a minimum and maximum range. So for this resistance and maintaining the balance, there is a minimum and maximum range. So for the tolerance and resistance, there is a minimum and maximum range. If the stress faced by the environment or the ecosystem is too high, then the balance of the ecosystem is lost and collapsed. When talking now, we are moving into another topic called ecological succession. So an orderly process of change in a community structure and function with time mediated through modification of the physical environment and ultimately culminating in a stabilized ecosystem. Whole sequence of community which are transitory are known as serial stages. Ecological succession starting from different substrata or areas are named differently. So hydrarch or hydrosphere, this ecological succession starts from the water or the pond. Mesarch, it starts from an adequate moist area. And Zarak or Xerosphere is an ecological succession that starts from dry areas or areas with less moisture. They can also be of following type: lithosphere starting from bare rock, smamosphere starting on sand, halosphere starting on saline soil. So this is a picture showing the ecological succession. So from the bare rocks, it moves on with time, it moves on through different forms through succession. From the primary succession moves on to the secondary succession and ultimately to a forest. So this is how the succession takes place with time. So a community is being formed from the bare rocks to a full-fledged community, that is a forest is being formed. Now when we talk about the process of succession, it includes nudation. It is a development of bare area without any life forms. Development of bare area without any life forms. When we talk about invasion, successful establishment of one or more species by migration or dispersal leading to the establishment. These are called pioneer species. So the first species to enter in that ecological succession is known as pioneer species. And the next aspect that we need to look into is competition and co-action. As the number of individual increases, there develops a competition for space, water, nutrition. We know when the individuals in a particular area is more, there will be a competition among themselves for their sustaining their life. So this competition is interspecific, that is within a different species, or intraspecific within the same species. So this competition can be between the species or between different species. So in this way, they sustain in the ecosystem. The next is the reaction. The living organisms grow, use water and nutrients, form substratum, having strong influence on environment, which is modified to a large extent. And this is known as reaction. Stabilization. So the succession ultimately culminates in a stable community called as climax, which is in equilibrium with the environment. So these are the process of a succession. So it starts from the nudation, invasion, competition, co-action. reaction and ultimately reach to a climax where there is equilibrium with the environment. Successor in sterile stage is shown in this figure. The image shows how there is, with time, there is a gradual progress happening and the succession happening, and finally it reached to a climax stage wherein which it is equilibrium with the environment. This is again an example of the ecological succession, that is hydrarch. So it starts from a wet area and reaches to a climax area wherein which it is in equilibrium with the environment. And again, an example of cerarch, which starts from a bare rock, ultimately through the succession with time reaches to the climax. When talking about the types of ecosystem, it includes ocean, estuary, pond, rivers, tundra ecosystem, forest ecosystem, deserts, grasslands, crop fields, gardens. All these are different types of ecosystem wherein which we can see, the biophysical, the chemical, the geographical factors are different. So this actually shows how it is. So we can see this ocean and estuary is a marine ecosystem, whereas pond, rivers are a freshwater ecosystem, wherein which it comes under the aquatic ecosystem. And when talking about the terrestrial ecosystem, there is natural ecosystem and man-made ecosystem. In the natural ecosystem, tundra, forests, deserts, and grasslands come, whereas man-made ecosystem, the gardens, crop fields come. So this is how there are different types of ecosystem. And this is all. So I think in this session we have covered a lot many things. We have learned about the ecosystem, the functions, the structure, and also another aspect, that is the food chain, food web, and the ecological succession. I hope you have understood about all these things, and have a nice day. See you in the next session. Thank you.